Now, should Mike Pompeo be confirmed given his successful meeting with Kim Jong-un to former Trump and Bush 43 State Department senior advisor Christian Whiton on if that meeting should help? I mean, does it look? It didn't move the needle, did it, Christian?
Well, it did.
With this committee, it hasn't, maybe. Or maybe it did with Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp.
Well, I worked on Rex Tillerson's confirmation, and we did get actually a couple of pickups, and Manchin was one of them, so that's nice to come along. Warner for Virginia might be another one that could still come along. Either way, as was just reported, he's going to pass on the floor, but you have this astounding display of partisanship from Democrats block voting against him on the committee, and the first time a committee that used to be bipartisan is going to give a no vote to Secretary of State nominee.
What will be their rationale? What do they tell voters and do they tell the American public? Why could you legitimately say, hey, I did not vote for this guy, even though, I mean, we go and check the record, perhaps some of them did vote for him as CIA director.
Right. And that's, you know, a big culprit here is Tim Kaine, the failed vice presidential candidate who voted for Pompeo for CIA director, changes his vote now in the committee, and he'll vote no. And he said, well, Donald Trump isn't big on diplomacy, and I'm afraid Pompeo will contribute to that. Well, we have evidence that Pompeo and Trump are great at diplomacy. They have done with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, what previous presidents haven't. So it's just partisanship. There is no principle.
The hypocrisy in that. I mean, what does he define as diplomacy? You send him a pallet of cash and various denominations, maybe about $1 billion worth, and then start talking? I mean, really, this feels like the epitome of negotiations. It's tough, it's hard, it's transparent, but it's starting to move. The needle is moving, and Pompeo has played a big role in that.
There is, and Trump diplomacy is very different than Bush and Obama and Clinton. He's willing to walk away from bad deals, just like Reagan was willing to walk away from a bad deal with the Russians at Reykjavik in 1986, which actually led to a very successful arms control agreement. Trump's willing to do that here. You know, we have to ask the question, I think, if what the Democrats are doing weakens the president and weakens Pompeo, he will get confirmed. But the North Koreans have to be watching this, too, and they're probably a little surprised.
I would suspect the North Koreans, the Chinese, the Iranians, I would suspect all of these leaders in these rogue nations or nations that are vying for dominance with America are watching how much animosity the opposition party has, and they must be using that in their calculus, right? I mean, this gives them some leverage to some degree because none of them face this, right? I mean, China, you don't have a media that hates the guy, or, you know, he doesn't have to go back to Congress. Same thing with North Korea, the same thing in Iran for the most part. I mean, they do get some leverage off of this, don't they?
That's right. They get encouragement, I think, more, and they see that, you know, it's a false signal. I think the American people are behind Trump. Clearly, polls show that on North Korea, but it does weaken them, and there are tremendous number of other posts that are open. There's Rick Grinnell, who would be ambassador to Germany, Doug Manchester.
Let's stop on Rick Grinnell for a moment. What the heck is going on? I mean, what's the record for someone not being confirmed with these sort of credentials and qualifications?
That's right. Rick, who was here in New York at the U.S. mission to the UN through all of the big fights of the 2000s, who's an excellent diplomat. Another one I mentioned, Doug Manchester, respected business leader, up for an important Caribbean post. And, you know, with the example of Germany, there are big things going on in Germany now. We need an ambassador now. The embassy there just gave a ridiculous contract, very suspicious and unappealing, and that wouldn't have happened if we had a real ambassador. And also with Merkel there, it's not, I mean, she could go either way on a number of issues, and we want to have our voice heard.
I mean, just in this last mission in Syria, right, I think she gave us moral support. But other than that, you know, and I think a lot of Americans are surprised that France threw in right away the UK, but Germany certainly at odds with America on some very key issues, and you need someone there working that from a diplomatic point of view.
Right, and again, going back to the hypocrisy, this committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, is the one that always says diplomacy is so important. Let's not just rely on the military or hard power, and yet now we see the stunning display of partisanship that actually impedes diplomacy.
I know President Trump likes Rand Paul. I think they have a very good relationship. Perhaps that's why Mark Short is the one attacking him. But at what point, and again, I thought that was a great point brought up, that Rand Paul thought John Kerry would make a great Secretary of State, but doesn't think Mike Pompeo does. Does his entrenched belief in a certain political ideology hurt the overall Republican Party and the Trump agenda?
It does. It's also, again, very peculiar because he says he's a non-interventionist. But again, if you're impeding the alternative to intervention, are you really a non-interventionist? And also, Rand Paul has no plan for North Korea. He has no plan for the threat from China. If we had listened to him, ISIS would not be the greatly diminished threat that it is today. All he does is wail about these imagined prerogatives of the Senate. And at the end of of the day, okay, the Senate can vote and bloviate, but we need to defend our country.
Christian Whiton, great having you. Great seeing you in the flesh, man.
Thanks,
It's usually
Charles.
remote. See you soon.
Great to be here.